Chapter 7. During bath time, Max had demanded a game of Battleship while Mia reenacted the entire plot of The Little Mermaid. Too bad for Efren, both games called for a whole lot of splashing. By the time Efren got them into bed, he was as beat as he was soaked. With the twins now asleep, he headed to the kitchen table to start the hour or so's worth of homework waiting for him. But instead, Efren pushed the thought of his assignments aside. He looked around at the apartment, thinking about the homes he passed each day to and from school. He thought about the grassy front yards large enough to play soccer in. He tried to picture himself running around like he'd seen the other kids at his school doing. Only no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't seem to do it. His mind simply refused. Why, it said, what's the point? You're never going to have anything even close to that, not you. Efren shut his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to fight the churning feeling in his gut. He missed Ama, her smile, her laugh, her cooking, and her hugs. But what he really missed was the way she seemed to brighten the entire world. Now that she was gone, his life, well, secondhand. He scanned the entire studio apartment, looked up at the water-damaged ceiling, then at the mismatched pieces of furniture that littered the room, and of course, down at the two twin mattresses covering most of the floor. Never before had his home felt so small, so poor. His family didn't have much, but somehow Ama had managed to keep this fact from really sinking in. Now it would become his job to protect Max and Mia, but how? He unzipped his backpack and organized the assignments by degree of difficulty, easiest first. He stared at the sample sentence for language arts. Sally's mother bakes wonderful cookies. Mother was the subject, bakes was the verb, and cookies was the direct object. He turned to the kitchen and wondered if Ama would ever come back, ever step foot in this kitchen again. Just then he heard the rattling of keys and then the metal screen to the front door creak open. "Appa!" Efren greeted him with a hug. Appa squeezed back, holding on a bit longer than usual. "Here," he said, handing him the pizza box. "Put this in the fridge. It's for the three of you tomorrow." Appa turned toward the door. "I'll be right back." Pizza. Max and Mia were going to be excited. Efren's peeked inside the box. Pepperoni and pineapple, his favorite. He approached the window and saw Appa talking to a man. They were standing at the back of Appa's pickup truck. The man wore jeans and boots like Appa and said something that made Appa shake his head. Then Appa said something to make the man nod before offering his hand. The two men climbed in onto the back of the truck and unfastened the metal tool bin. Appa's tools? Efren couldn't believe it. They were Appa's prized possession. No matter how much he used them, he always kept them looking new. Ama would sometimes joke calling the collection his fourth child. Not wanting to seem nosy or metiche, as Ama would say, Efren decided to get back to his homework. Appa entered holding a check in his hand. If Efren couldn't help himself, is that enough money to get Ama back? No, but it's a start. Appa looked over at the twins. "That's what we need to talk about. I landed an overtime job at my boss's headquarters, only it's late at night, so I need to know if you can handle the little ones a bit longer." Efren tried to make sense of what he'd just heard. "Yeah, but wait, how are you going to work day and night? When will you sleep?" "It's only temporary. Besides," Appa flexed his biceps, "your old man is made of steel. You don't need to worry about me, okay, mijo? I'll be working as a super for a cleaning crew. They'll be doing most of the work. I'll just be supervising." Appa went over to the drawer in the kitchen area and came back with a bag full of coins, Ama's stash of laundromat money. "Here, for food." He handed the coins to Efren. "Between this and the check I just got, we'll be fine. Now go to bed. It's late." Efren wrapped himself in his blanket and watched Appa spray on some deodorant, then grab a slice of cold pizza and head off to work. Appa was super too, a real super man. The next day, after dropping off the twins, Efren hurried to class. The first bell rang, but he waited by the door watching the other students enter. What was he going to tell Mr. Garrett about having missed attention? "F-man, what you doing?" It was David riding on his skateboard while bouncing to a reggae beat that only he could hear. Efren shrugged. "Enjoying the last minutes of my life?" "What do you mean? I didn't show up for detention yesterday," Efren sighed. David picked up his board. "Oh, wow. How about I go in with you? He might yell at me for bringing in my skateboard and forget all about it. Come on." Like most of David's plan, this one didn't work out either. Efren entered the classroom. Mr. Garrett rose to his feet, looked up at the clock, and waited for the bell before saying a word. "Mr. Nava, do you mind explaining why you chose to disregard your detention yesterday?" Efren's stomach twisted, and for a tiny moment he thought he might be sick. He took a deep breath. Mr. Garrett would not let up. "Mr. Nava, I'm waiting." Efren's blood boiled. After everything he'd been through, now this? He looked at Mr. Garrett and glared. "Why?" he said, his anger spilling out. "It's not like you even care." The class went silent. Students looked around, mouths agape, total disbelief. Efren's chest rose and fell. All he could do was dig his nails into his palm. Mr. Garrett stood there perfectly still, perfectly silent. He studied Efren's closed fist, wrinkly clothes, and sloppy, uncombed hair. Efren felt the room shrink and tugged at his shirt uncomfortably. Strangely, though, Mr. Garrett's scowl seemed to lessen. Perhaps he'd just come up with the perfect consequence for him. "Why don't you take a seat, Efren?" The class stirred once more. Not only had Efren talked back, Mr. Garrett had actually let it go. Heck, he'd even addressed Efren by his first name. That simply never happened. Efren took a seat, aware that all eyes were now on him. Mr. Garrett's icy teacher voice suddenly returned. "Now, class, let's begin." A half hour later, Mr. Garrett had completely filled out the whiteboard with a giant timeline of World War II. "Okay, now that I've gone over the material, go ahead and jot down the notes, silently." Efren couldn't explain what had happened. When class finally ended, he gathered his thoughts and started walking out, but sure enough, Mr. Garrett called him over. Efren walked back to the teacher's desk, but Mr. Garrett didn't say a word, just stood waiting for the last student to exit. "Missed homework, showing up late, talking back. This lack of responsibility is so unlike you," he finally said. "Is everything all right?" Efren didn't answer. The safest thing for him was to keep his head down and shut his eyes tight enough to keep the tears from escaping. Mr. Garrett's voice softened. "We adults can be pretty nearsighted sometimes. We forget that kids can have problems too. I mean, you normally come to class ready to learn, and your clothes? I've never seen you without perfectly creased lines before." Efren's thoughts turned to Ma, and before he could pull his hand out of his pocket and wipe his face, a few tears managed to escape. "I know what it's like to have one's life turned upside down." He turned to a frame on his desk, a picture of his ex-wife and 2 kids, then back at Efren. "You, my friend, have that same look." Efren brushed his face with the fold of his sleeve and looked up at the photo. Mr. Garrett's ex-wife had long, wavy hair, a honey beige complexion, and caramel eyes, just like Ma. A Latina? He'd married a Latina? Does this mean he could now trust Mr. Garrett? After all, the last thing he wanted to do was put Pa in danger too. If he were arrested, the entire family would most likely be uprooted like some uninvited weed and discarded across the border. Mr. Garrett's brow crinkled as he studied Efren's face. "Look, Efren, you don't have to tell me what's going on with you, but you might want to consider telling someone you can trust." Efren's eyes panned from Mr. Garrett and back to the photo of his ex-wife and 2 kids, a boy and a girl. For Efren, it was now or never. "My mom, she got deported." The word seemed to escape alongside his rogue tears. Mr. Garrett sighed deeply. "I'm so sorry to hear that. What about your father? He's trying to figure out how to bring her back." Mr. Garrett took another deep breath. "Listen, I'm not saying it will be easy, but you need to leave this up to your father. You're just a kid, and this is too much for you to place on your shoulders. Trust your father. Let him handle this, okay?" Efren wanted to accept what his teacher had said, but thoughts of Max and Mia immediately filled his head. Who would protect them while Pa was trying to get Ma back? No, Efren was the oldest. Ma's being deported was his problem too. He would need to help out every way he could, no matter what. "Thank you, sir," said Efren. Mr. Garrett squeezed his eyes shut and sighed. "I just wish I could do more." Efren reached for the back of his neck and rubbed it. The worry, the pressure, they were wearing him down so much that he barely made it through math class. After solving Miss Covey's latest math brain teaser, he reached for the duct tape wallet Pa had made for him and pulled out the money he had left over from the food truck the night before. He patted his pocket, making sure he still had Ma's laundromat money. The bell rang. Efren joined the student stampede to the lunch line. He wasn't hungry, but knew he couldn't afford to pass up a free meal, even if it was just a school lunch. To be fair, the food the school served wasn't that bad, but it couldn't compete with the lunches Ma used to make for him each day. The burrito he picked up, just beans and yellow cheese, was greasy and runny, and yet the corners of the flour tortilla somehow managed to stay hard and cold. Efren looked around at the side choices, the peanut butter crackers, string cheese packets, and celery sticks, and wondered which items Max and Mia would most likely eat. But what if the food is spoiled? Efren couldn't risk it and ended up going with the crackers and juice box. Then, instead of joining up with David and the rest of his friends, Efren took a seat at the far corner of the cafeteria. He spent most of the break staring at the clock overhead and carefully reorganizing the stuff in his backpack. At 11:56 a.m., the afternoon supervisors took their positions along the stairway leading to the main floor. Lunch was about to end and he needed to hurry. He scouted the area and headed toward an empty table. Efren's heart beat like a jackhammer. He knew that Ahmad's laundromat money wouldn't last long and needed to do something about it. Stealing food from school wasn't only wrong, it was embarrassing. If any kids caught him, they'd never let him live it down. Regardless, Efren knew what he needed to do. He unzipped his backpack and headed to the table closest to the main office. Kids didn't like to hang out around there. He leaned up against the closest trash bin and grabbed some of the unopened bags of celery and crackers students had thoughtlessly tossed away. Quickly, he zipped his bag shut. "Hey, Efren," David called out as he ran over. Efren almost leaped out of his pants as he hid his backpack behind him. "Where were you?" said David as he walked over to him and extended his hand. Efren reached over to him and the two did their usual dap, ending in a quick thumb wrestling match. Efren hoped David wouldn't notice the trembling of his hands and voice. "Oh, just trying to come up with some new poster ideas for your campaign. Yeah, I can't believe Jennifer stole my ideas. Anyway, come check this out. Some dude online actually drank a glass of milk through his nose. I swear." "Yeah, sure." David grinned and rushed back to his table. Efren dropped his head and sighed. How did things get this bad?